Welcome to our digital debrief on virtual exhibitions. Our speakers today are Jennifer Collins, President and CEO of JDC Events, and Cory Smith, Vice President of Strategic Services at Shepard LiveEX.
When we talk about virtual exhibitions, a virtual exhibition is the same as an in-person exhibition, except that it's online. And first, though, I want to address that elephant in the room, if you will. And a large part of this perspective is because people just don't know about this platform and this medium, basically. So I can understand why people have this perception. But essentially, there are some that think that the virtual exhibition is not as valuable as the live. But of course, we know that's not the case. They are not mutually exclusive. They both have their own power and characteristics, and they are simply tools in the toolbox. So I'm curious as to whether you agree with that or not.
I completely agree. For years, virtual events are not new, as we've talked about many times. They've been around for a couple of decades, but the approach to virtual events for most organizers has been to record and to part content on a platform. But now I think the technology has really been upgraded. It's in a position to provide a very similar value proposition to the experience that we get online. And I think this pandemic is the tipping point that's going to make more hybrid productions common as we get back to producing our live events. I think we've all been staying in touch with family, continuing to do business using robust video conferencing solutions. And now that you have that two-way discourse and that ability to really engage at a virtual event, I think it's going to be a nice complementary piece to a live event. But live events, I don't think you can replace the value of the opportunity to feel the energy at a live event with thousands of people who have very similar interests, and to be able to see and touch and feel and experience live content. But yeah, that is the perception. But I'm a big believer that the two are complementary and will, at the end of the day, present a much better experience for the consumer.
I totally agree. And what's interesting is that just like an in-person event, with the virtual, you still need to do the same things in the sense of defining your strategy, the organizational goals, the value proposition. What is it that you want your stakeholders to walk away with? It's the same thing as you would do in person. So it's more so creating, though, which is different. You would have to create that online experience. I've heard some people say that, you just can throw your event online. To be honest, I don't know what that means, and it doesn't sound like that would be very good, but it's something where I'm curious in your thoughts, Cory, as to whether, from a technology standpoint, that's something that you encounter when you're working with people in the sense of really trying to help them to build the online experience as opposed to just throw it online.
Yeah, well, I'll have to say that early on, when producing virtual events, that was the strategy. Let's take the content, let's put it online, and we forget about it, because we were really focused on, all the things that we need to do to produce our live events that, for most organizations are very profitable, and most of us had the skill set to do just that, to produce, really engaging and highly valued live events. But in order to produce a successful virtual event, you've got to treat it, in my opinion, just like you're planning for your live event. In fact, when we start planning for a live event, we want to know what success looks like for every stakeholder at the event, and you have to do the same for the online channel. And I believe that it may be slightly more involved to manage an online experience. It's a little harder to keep people engaged online. So, you got to think about, sending out notifications, entertainment, having hosts in rooms, having features within your platform that are going to take them seamlessly to, the next event on their agenda. And a lot of times with a live event, you do all the planning, you do the setup, and then, it almost takes on a life of itself. And I think at this stage, you have to be a little more hands-on with producing the virtual.
Yes, totally agree.
Yeah.
All really, really great points. And that actually moves us to the next one. There's hybrid events you did mention, and I just want to quickly say about them, just in case those of you that are watching don't necessarily know what hybrid events are. It's when you have an in-person event and then you also have a virtual component to it, and so they partner together to help to distribute your particular message. And so they are great strategy to consider. And we know that nowadays, we're not able to meet live all that much just because of the crisis that we're in, but it's something that for you to think about for the future in terms of your strategy. But, in continuing on the online experience, there are some factors that we know now. You just can't throw an event online. It's not the best strategy to do so, or best approach. But there is a project management component, meaning there are some who don't realize that this is just like an in-person, where you have roles to manage, you have timelines, work plans, you have onboarding, and just run of shows, and all of those details have to be managed. So it's important for people to understand that that's going to be a part of the process. Would you agree with that, Cory?
I definitely agree. And I think our organizations are going to look very different in the future. I think you may see, new job types that are going to be required and necessary to successfully produce a hybrid event. Our industry's been forced down this path, or many feel that way. But, I think the ones that are going to be successful coming out of this are the ones that have the right mindset. We have an opportunity, because the technology is so great, to produce hybrid events that make the overall experience much better for our customers. Even those that are attending a live event have the ability to take in more sessions, to have more meetings, to see more exhibitors by using some of the really robust features that you have with the platforms, and primarily driven by video conferencing solutions. So I think those that have the right mindset are going to be successful. We want to make the experience better for customers. We work with a lot of clients, and I know you guys do too. And I've had these conversations with many of the members of your team. It's getting people motivated and excited about where this industry is going. I think some see this as a short-term solution. We want to paint a picture that this is a long-term play. This is this is the tipping point that's going to force us into creating, and allowing ourselves to reach audiences that perhaps we never reached before at our live conferences.
Absolutely. And that's a really good point. Those are really great points, because when you talk about, and I'll just go through this quickly, identifying the features, platform, and delivering on that engagement, you just really explained all of that, because there are some who think that finding the platform is step number one, which it's not. Step number one is what we talked about before, the goals of your organization. What is it that you're trying to achieve? Who are your stakeholders? What is the value that they bring? Identifying those pieces, and then you map your platform to meet your goals of the actual organization. So this actually brings us to a great segue into the next 3 slides that have some pictures on it. And so, Cory, I'd like you to go through these slides to tell us about what we're seeing and what the potential is for the functionality of a virtual exhibit hall, and what people can expect as they're potentially putting one online.
Sure. Yeah. So you made a very, very great point, and I want to stress it one more time. The technology is really important, but it's selecting the space. If you're thinking about a live event, it's the convention center. But you need to know, most of the clients that we work with, they know what the drivers are for their business. They know that this is an event that, it's about meetings that sometimes take place in the hotel lobby, or it's a buy-sell event. So it's really important to match needs, or the things that are driving your event, to the features that you're looking for with the platform. But it starts well before. as you've said.
Absolutely.
This example is more of a 3D environment. You're going to see, if you've been out shopping platforms, you'll see that you've got 3D solutions where you're walking into a lobby. You may even select an avatar, and it's just like you're experiencing, your live event. And then you have others that are more traditional website layout and designs, where you got easy navigation, easy to get to sessions with a lot of video conferencing capabilities, a lot of search and filtering functionality. And in this example, and I think what we need to look for with any solution that we're using is it has to be really easy to navigate. Online, if a user goes to a site and they can't find what they're looking for, they're going to fall off quickly. And in this example, I really like this because, immediately, I'm able to see the drivers of my event. There's a networking lounge that you see in the lobby in this 3D environment. You see, very easily how I get into the exhibit hall for commerce opportunities. There's a place for sessions and very easy navigation down the left rail. So crazy easy to navigate is the key.
Good. And so the next one is another example of a different format or different feature of it.
Yeah, and most of these environments are really flexible. This is an example of an alpha listing of your exhibit hall. We're working with some groups to create interactive floor plans that are more campus style. As Jennifer said early, I've always struggled to create a segmented or a pavilion style show. I think that's a much better experience for the consumer or our attendees. But I've struggled because a lot of times competitors of like products don't want to be next to each other. Well, in the virtual world, those limits are taken down. So you've got really flexible opportunities with most of these sites. And again, easy navigation. It's 1 or 2 clicks to get to the content that you're looking for at the event.
So Cory, with this, I just want to ask one question before we go to the next one. If you could just go back to the last slide. Is that format something that, one more click, is that format something that can be changed? Meaning it's something where you can, decide that we don't like that. We want to be positioned differently or shown differently. And so, we want to make sure that people have an understanding that it can be different. And so if they go to the next one, it will just give people a different feel. It doesn't have to look like that, basically. It can look like whatever it is that you decide. Is that correct?
Yeah, it depends on the platform, but that's a great qualifying question because, many of these events, they understand their audience and how their audience works their expo, and being able to have the flexibility for different types of environments, I think, is a very important feature. This one is by Alpha. A lot of the platforms that we're working with, you can lay it out by product. You can make it more interactive, like the 3D environment. So you've got a combination of a traditional website navigation and a 3D environment. We're doing that with networking events also, which we'll talk about in a few moments.
Okay, and then I'll let you get to the next one since I stopped the process. So Go ahead.
Yeah, and this is an example of a video virtual exhibit booth. And as you can see, you've got your exhibit staff across the top. You have, those that are visiting the booth along the right rail. They're presenting product information or telling, their company's story. You've got all the great navigation tools on the side. And most of these are a microsite where you can load a variety of content that people can take with them. They can download, take with them. But, going back to being strategic, we got to encourage the exhibitors to do the same thing. If they're at your event to reveal a new product, they need to set their booth up to respond to that. So, in most environments, you can create multiple video rooms. So you may have an area where you're going in, you're doing a product reveal. You can set up an area that allows you and your sales team to connect with current customers to talk about, service changes that you may be going through. So think about the goals and objectives of their experience at the event, and these are flexible sites. And in this case, you can create an infinite number of video virtual rooms within it. So make sure that you're designing this to line up with the goals and objectives that you have.
That's good stuff. And, that actually takes us to the next phase of really more engagement. I just want to touch upon very quickly regarding that, because you did hit upon some really good points on the last slide, in that there is capability to be able to do so much in the virtual realm. There are some people that will say, oh, you can't have those serendipitous moments that you experience when you're in person. For instance, I maybe sit next to somebody at a lunch, or I bump into somebody in an elevator, those sorts of moments. But there can be a craft of that. You can create that with certain types of shared experiences, perhaps, that you develop, whether it's watching a performance together, gamification, or maybe a raffle, or something that can bring people together. So I'm curious, Cory, if there's some client that you've had, or just some experiences that about that exhibitors at their exhibition really were able to maximize their engagement in the sense of a shared experience.
Yeah, well, we touched on some of these, but we're working actually with your team on some of those events where, we have the ability to be as creative as we want to be. And that's where the JDC team and our teams, I think can really, help and play a role. But, I'm excited about really the video conferencing opportunities, because I think that is the one piece that takes the virtual and turns it into the closest that we've ever been to having the same value proposition. At any point, you can be walking down the aisle and see somebody that a colleague, and you can immediately pull into a one-to-one video conference. We're doing a party by the pool. We've got a museum interactive networking party. And within those environments, we're creating themes, industry topics, or things that we're gathering through the data collection from registration. You get a sense of what people are interested in.
Right,
so we can create these rooms that are structured and allow people that have similar interests to come together. You can do live entertainment. We can take the sponsors out of that exhibit hall and we can park them. Kara and I are working on, an environment where you take sponsors and they're by the pool. They've got their own little cabana where they're doing their entertainment. So, we can get, as creative as we want to be with the technology that we have. And that's the key to driving engagement and hitting on some of those experiences that you talked about.
Those are all great points, and a great segue into the next slide that shows the branding aspect of exhibitors or sponsors and how they can be placed throughout the space, because there are some when you're in person and at an exhibition in person, where there are exhibitors that will say, well, we don't want to be next to this person, or we don't want to be next to that, because it's a competitor of some sort, and that's totally understandable. They also may want to have a better position that they're jockeying for. We get it, we understand it. But in the virtual exhibition, the boundaries are limitless, and those sorts of situations and issues can be easily rectified. Could you just take us through this slide just to show us a bit of the explanation here as to how the exhibitors or sponsors really can?
Yeah, this is a traditional digital ad opportunity. You've got a lot of real estate to help monetize your event. You've got sponsors on the right rail. We've got an activation, a giveaway. I'm certain this is sponsored, so you have the opportunity to engage with and do something very active with a sponsor. Gamification. Most of these platforms have the ability to track every step that the attendee's taking, or every click. And, that's being measured. You've got leaderboards. So you can take them, along the journey and take them to the exhibitors and sponsors that have invested in the event. These are
Cory, I just want to jump in there with you, because I do want to say that you're not just limited to one particular area on the website. You can appear throughout all of the, depending upon how it's built, all of the different areas to best maximize it. So because why I want to say that is because there was a polling at the beginning where there were some people that really wanted to better understand about exhibits and sponsorships. And so this is something for them to consider, that when you are building your sponsors online for the virtual exhibition, there are different places that you can put them to best maximize where the visibility is going to be at any given time. So I just want to make sure to hone in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And some other examples of that are, we're working with some clients that are taking related exhibitors or sponsors into session rooms, and it's a natural transition. It's a topic that requires a certain solution. They're bringing 3 or 4 sponsors that have solutions that can help the attendees that are interested in that topic. So, and then we talked about the party by the pool.
Yes.
They're part of the entertainment. They're part of the education. They're part of everything that you're doing at the event. We can pick up that URL and we can place them where the qualified audience is. And the really important part of this is you can measure everything. And, if you have exhibitors that are pushing back or sponsors, you can talk about the engagements that they have. There's scoring and, and lead scoring with most of these. And, there's no doubt that, they're seeing hopefully the people that they need to see, but if they're not, it's a conversation about, things that they can do creatively to engage with the audience that they're missing at the virtual event. It's no different than a live event, except for it's a lot more flexible. You can move them around, but, more importantly, you can measure, the actual engagement that they're getting.
Absolutely. And you bring up a good point, because that takes us to the data analytics. We know that data is king, just like content is. And so, with the virtual exhibitions, it's special in the sense of you can collect pre, during, and post data. You can actually use data that you're collecting in progress and use it to help promote or to do certain things. So I wanted you to give just a brief perspective as to the type of analytics that people need to be aware of that they can capture to help best measure how it's doing.
Yeah, so in the beginning, you're registering, and we're learning a lot about who they are and what they're interested in experiencing at your event. Those become preferences that can be matched with others, either exhibitors or peer-to-peer, matching up with other attendees. I think that's the most powerful part of this experience. Personalization is really big in all parts of our life. Online, if you're shopping and you shop at a lot of the same e-commerce solutions, they know who you are, they know what your sizes are, they know who your favorite teams are, and they're making those recommendations to try to make that experience better for you. It's no different in the event world. I want to know who you are, and I want to know what your interests are. And I want to make sure that you're getting those recommendations so that you can attend and take advantage of all the great things that are being offered. And if I do that, I'm going to walk away saying I had a great experience, and I'm going to keep coming back, and I'm going to buy from, the exhibitors and sponsors that are at the event.
Yeah, no, that's really, really great stuff. And, people have a lot of great data on me because I'm always being followed by all sorts of ads. So it does work. And then I continue to buy. So it's the same thing, but it is really valuable information to help you to be able to measure and to do it better. And then also to think about how you can use that with your sponsors so that they know how much their investment really is working for them. So that brings us to the round this out. Let's just end this by talking about a little bit of money. Not really, but sort of, in the sense of some considerations. We talked about earlier that selling the people think that the live events are not quite as, the virtual events are not quite as valuable as the live events. But it's interesting because I was on, it was a blog or a listserv, an industry listserv the other day, and there was a woman who worked for an association, and she started a discussion because she was moving her in-person exhibition online. And so one of the things that she was discussing was that she wanted to get at least 50% of what her cost was for the in-person. So whatever she charged, she wanted 50% of that for the virtual. However, there were some of the exhibitors that came back and said, we want to give you just 30%. So I thought that conversation was fascinating because what it spoke to was how people feel that they just are not going to get the same level of value if their exhibit is online versus if I can be in person and I can see and I can touch the people, which is not the case, which is why the value needs to be sold and not the platform. And I'll give you another example of that, where it could be a 5,000 person conference and in person. And then that 5,000 in-person conference, and I know, Cory, you probably experienced this, sometimes can jump to 25,000 people. I'm not saying all of the virtual exhibitions will do this, but there is potential for it. Now, if I'm an exhibitor and I'm a sponsor and I was going in person and I was happy with my 5,000 people on, in person, but I now know online that I can potentially get 25,000 people, that to me is value, which is why the data that we just finished talking about is so, so critical to understand. Live and digital should be comparable cost. One should not be devalued because of the delivery. We've got to get into selling the value and not the platform. Would you agree?
I completely agree. Yeah, I've worked with sales teams, and we're not selling concrete at our live events. What we're selling is access to a very qualified audience, and it really doesn't matter what channel they're in. If you're bringing the right people to drive commerce, you shouldn't devalue that. And I think we're all accustomed to getting content for free online, but in a virtual event, it's different. You're bringing together qualified audience, and there's some risks that you have to mitigate. We talked about live streaming costs; those are very real, exposures. In a live event, it's bring as many people as you can, but in a virtual world, streaming minutes can, and especially if you're not charging for access, then that can be an exposure. So it's very easy to make some assumptions on how many people you're going to have, and to look at the streaming minutes per person and what the average usage is and what the cost per person is. And at the very minimum, I think we need to be charging for what that cost would be per person to mitigate any risk. We want to be excited about bringing 1,000% more than we anticipated to our virtual event.
Totally agree. And I just want to make this one last point too, because we talked about the importance of project management and how that really is the engine to ensure that this online experience that you're developing is going to really come through. And so the project management, whether it's a third party that you work with or whether it's somebody within an organization, if you work for an association or a company of some sort, there has to be a line item for that particular cost, because the platform is not necessarily going to manage that for you. So there does need to be that distinction, because I have run across, since more people are becoming more accustomed to having to work online, that people believe that it's all they just need to do is get the platform and they'll be fine. And that's not the case, because you and I, Cory, we work together, our companies work together, we know our roles, but we know that there is a role for each of us in it. It's not just the platform that's going to perform by itself, right?
Like you and I've talked about this. You've leased the convention center when you've picked out the technology. Now you've got to, we have to move the exhibitors in. There's carpet for us, tables, chairs that you need to bring in. There's equipment that goes into the meeting room. More importantly, the job that a JDC does, which is planning, making sure you have, really smart ways to help people engage. That's going to be the key to making this successful. Flexible technology enables creativity. And the creativity, I think, is what's going to make all of us successful in this new frontier. But hybrid, you're going to start to see new job titles pop up, and it's maybe depending on the complexity of the event, may be necessary. You're going to learn new terms like vMix, softwares that are helping to enable content to be shared in very creative ways. So. I just want to encourage everybody to be a divergent thinker and get excited about, really, I think, providing a much better experience for our customers. JDC has evolved and is well positioned to deliver on that. But I do think the customer is going to win at the end of this.
Absolutely. This is a partnership. You know, we by no means want the virtual digital world to be all that there is, because we believe still in live events. We want to do live events, and we know that we're going to get back there sometime. But until then, this is a great tool for us still to be able to talk with each other, to communicate, to get our messages out and deliver them. And so this has been a really great discussion. We have gone a little bit over in our time, and I will take the blame for that because I wanted to make sure that we would have enough of a discussion just to talk through some concepts. I mean, this was an overview, and so it really was a way for you, though, to get something, a nugget that you can take to at least help you start thinking about how to actually do the virtual exhibitions. And so with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions that there might be.
Thanks, Jennifer and Cory. One of our questions is, can you provide an example of a successful exhibition that has been taken completely virtually from a live one?
Actually, do you have one, Cory, that you want to share?
Go ahead, Jennifer. Yeah, you go first.
Okay, well, what I was going to say is that we do have one, and it was sort of similar to the example that I gave, but a client's event hosted about 5,000 people in person, and then it was moved online. So it became a virtual exhibition, and the size doubled to 10,000 active participants. And why it's important to say that term active is because that means people were engaged in the platform. They were not necessarily multitasking. Because of the data analytics, we were able to see where they were going, how they were spending their time, you know, how many downloads there were, if that was a part of it. So it was really great to understand and see that these individuals were engaged and active. And so that sort of information is what you then can use to help promote your event, because you're going to have the data analytics. And so again, it goes back to selling that value to really get people to understand how to best think of this particular option as an experience that really can work for them. Cory, you had one.
I was just going to say, you know, a lot of these are beginning to come online. You know, we're about 8-9 weeks into, you know, this pandemic. And so there's not a lot of data, but right out of the gate, Cisco Live took one of their smaller events that they do on an annual basis. And typically they get about 10 to 11,000 at this event. They ended up with 85,000 viewers. So I think there are a lot of examples that have already happened, but we're beginning to see June, July, August, those events that postponed or canceled in March, April, and May are, you know, beginning to come online. And I think we'll have a lot more immediate examples to share in the near future. But this is new for all of us. You know, I've done virtual events. Jennifer and her team have been producing hybrid events, but I've probably done over 100 demos in the past 8 to 9 weeks of new platforms. And I joke with these guys that, you know, you were probably working 3 other jobs to support yourself if you were only selling virtual event software. So it's a brand new world for us. But, you know, I think, you know, the future is promising for where we can go, given the mass adoption by our clients, and then also the enhanced technology. It's I think doing so much better than it has been in the past.
Agreed.
Well, that leads into another great question, what is the lead time to convert a 3-day live event to a virtual event with exhibit hall and hands-on workshops? I think they're wanting to know if that can be turned quickly, probably.
So early days, when we were taking in-person to online, 3 to 4 weeks is what most of the providers were telling us. And now I think it's because of how busy everyone is, you know, in this world, 5 to 6 weeks on average is what I'm hearing.
Okay, and someone would like to know, would I need the same amount of staff to run a virtual exhibition? Jennifer, I think this is a good one for you.
Yeah, that's a great question, because that goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of project management. And so that's where your roles are going to need to be defined as to who's going to do what, who's going to own all the roles and manage them, who's going to do the run of show, who's going to manage the production. And then of course we have the platform and Cory and technology. So you would want to know who's going to be managing on that side, and on the project management side, we have to manage them. So there are a good number of people that need to be involved in the process. That's why it's important for you to outline exactly, when you map what type of online experience that you're trying to build, you want to make sure that you have the roles in place to be able to meet whatever those particular categories or aspects are. And so, Cory, would you agree with that?
I completely agree. And I think I may, especially if you're doing your first virtual event, may go overboard a bit and, make sure that your exhibitors, have a lot of hand-holding in education to feel comfortable in the environment, a lot of coaching to create, a engaging experience while they're there. Same with speakers. It may take a little more heavy lifting for this first event, and then they'll get accustomed to working in this environment. But,
Absolutely.
It's no different. You've got to have someone in the room helping to manage speakers. You've got to have someone, working with exhibitors, so I would say that, I would at least plan for working with, someone like JDC, or making sure you have people to cover, all the important elements that are going to go into making this successful.
Absolutely. Good stuff.
Thank you. I have one last question for you guys. Have you found, this is coming from one of our attendees, Jessica. She says, have you found any way to create those typical moments of discovery that usually happen on the show floor? That moment when you stumble upon a product or a brand that you weren't looking for.
Mm-hmm. Cory, I'll let you take that one. How I kind of liken that to is when I talked earlier about those serendipitous moments.
Right.
That was more so creating the engagement aspect. But Cory, what would be your thoughts of that in terms of somebody finding something in a virtual exhibition that maybe they very well may not have known about before in some way, shape, or form? Is there any likability to that or likelihood of that happening?
Well, I think in a lot of cases with the platforms, you have more opportunities to discover more products and solutions. If I'm walking the show floor, I'm trying to remember, I think the SEER average was people get to about 30 to 40 booths. Over the course of 2 or 3 days, with the discoverability tools that are in a lot of these platforms and the ability to filter and find exactly what you're looking for, I think you have the ability to do a lot more. Now with video conferencing, you're 2 clicks away from, once you find it, to being in a conversation just like we're in now and learning more about that product or solution. So I think, from what I've seen with the technology, I think you can cover a lot more real estate than you would, in some cases at a live event. So
True, very true. Well, this has been great. I'm not sure if there are any more questions, but Cory, I do want to say it was my pleasure. And to everyone out there, thank you for hanging in there with us. And we are looking forward to continuing to host you at future digital debriefs, and we'll be happy to continue the conversation offline as well.